From the communards to the clergy and the cha-cha-cha. The Reverend Richard Coles is perhaps the most famous parish priest in the land.
Well, Richard, this is a fantastic church.
Yeah, not a bad place to work.
it's spectacular. You put the fame of pop music behind you, but you sort of found it in lots of other ways. I'm thinking of Strictly, MasterChef. You've got 400,000 followers on Twitter. Do you enjoy fame?
Yes. I've never been one who's shrunk from a spotlight. It's a kind of part of what I do and who I am. The object, though, is to try to use the opportunities I have to reach people, to do so in a way which is responsible and consistent with what I'm called to do, which is to share the good news of Jesus Christ. What a paso doble on Strictly has got to do with that is another question. But I do think finding a way into the mainstream conversation that everyone else is having is a good thing for clergy to do.
So in 1990, 2 years after the communard split, you found faith. Why did you find faith? How did you find faith?
I think I was always a vicar waiting to happen who somehow walked into the wrong queue. I was a chorister when I was a kid, so I grew up in a place like this and in a world like this. But I was always certain that Christianity was a fairy tale and no one, in their right mind would go for that. But then after the turbulence of my 20s, being in a pop band, sex, drugs and rock and roll, I started wanting to reconnect to what I remembered from when I was a kid. And then one day I went to church and I went in as a skeptical spectator and boom, I came out as a participant. And I went from atheism to belief in God. I just saw the world in these kind of bright new colours and shapes and things that completely overwhelmed me and captivated me, and still does.
How did you square your faith with some of your life in the 1980s in the pop world?
Well, do you know what? I wouldn't be the first person who came to faith having trod a quite rocky and adventurous path. So there was nothing about that surprised me at all. There was plenty in the life before which I knew I had to make right because it was wrong, but lots that wasn't. When I applied for ordination, I had to fill in a form, and it said, have you ever taken non-prescription drugs? Of course, so and I got phoned up by the chief medical officer of the Church of England, and he said, you ticked the box. And I went, yeah, and he went, no one's ever ticked the box. I went, oh, well, we had the conversation.
In 2007, Richard met and fell in love with David, who later went on to be ordained himself. And with Richard's life in the public eye, they became perhaps the most visible gay couple in the Church of England.
How would you assess, then, the Church of England's stance on gay marriage?
If I take a deep breath and step back and think about it and talk to people and reason it, I understand that this is a complicated thing. There's another part of me, though, that is growingly impatient with it because I see LGBT people suffering as a consequence of their relationships not being given respect and of a denial of equal rights to them in various forums. And it's hard to put up with that.
Themselves unable to marry, Richard and David became civil partners. But sadly, after 12 years together, David died, just before Christmas 2019.
It made me laugh so much, and he was just so rich in generosity and kindness. He saved me from the worst aspects of myself, Sean. And that was really, really good for me. And also just making room in your life to love another person in all their glory and awfulness and all that stuff. It was a wonderful thing.
You've talked about previously how you and David, both ordained, are licensed by the Church of England to conduct marriages, but you couldn't marry each other in the Church of England. How did that make you feel?
I put up with it, actually. David didn't like it at all, and I wish it were different that we had been able to do that, because I think it would have made him happy, and I'd have liked to have made him happy. I thought at his funeral in this church, the last time I walked up the aisle with him, he was in a coffin. And it would have been nice to have walked up the aisle with him on my arm,
So we've had several chapters of your life, pop music, being in the church. What does the future hold?
Well, I'm retiring next year, So I will be retiring as vicar of Findon and leaving Findon, which I've loved, and I don't want to be a vicar anywhere else. So I'm going down to live on the south coast, and I'm going to volunteer with the agreement of the bishop and the chaplain general as a prison chaplain.
You won't have a house like this though, will you?
I doubt it very much. HMP Lewis doesn't quite match this, I don't think.
Brilliant. It's really good to talk to you. Thank you,
You too.
Richard.
Thanks.